Hi there. Welcome everybody to Chee-Tash. My name is Chris Lazar. We are doing the discussion for pages 51 through 70 of Man's Search for Meaning. And it was a little bit shorter this week. We didn't have I didn't ask nearly as many questions this week. That's not to say that there are many discussions, views, points you can make from these pages, but these were just some of the more interesting ones. First one, what does the quote from Dostoevsky about not being worthy of my sufferings mean? And this is in relation to page 66. I'm going to turn to it in my book right now. Of my edition, it's page 66. And towards the bottom of it, Viktor writes, he may retain his human dignity even in a concentration camp. Dostoevsky said once, there is only one thing that I dread, not to be worthy of my sufferings. These words frequently came to my mind after I became acquainted with those martyrs whose behavior in camp, whose suffering in death, bore witness to the fact that the last inner freedom cannot be lost. It can be said that they were worthy of their sufferings. The way they bore their suffering was a genuine inner achievement. Sorry, that was a long passage I just read. So what do you think this means? And there's a couple points he made, one of them being this. No matter how much pain and damage you took externally, whether that was from beatings, people yelling at you, from the cold, from not having enough food, emotional pain, from not knowing when things would end. And we're going to talk about that a little more. We talked about that last time with the time morph that kind of happens while you're in the camp. But your losses in those areas may happen, but the one thing, and again, this goes back to like one of the first pages of this book, the one thing they cannot take from you is your decision and on how you view the situation. You still have the freedom to decide in your mind what you think about the situation. That's the last inner freedom, is your decision to give up or not. Is to give up or not. And I think I mentioned this last time about, I remember being in South Carolina, we rented like a hotel somewhere, and on the fridge there was a magnet, and the magnet said, there was a story on the magnet, and then the ending, it was like in bold or like big letters. Life is Life is 10% what happens to you and 90% how you react to it. And this makes me think of something similar. No matter how much the damage you took in the camp, the last freedom you had still was your decision to give up or not, your decision on how you viewed that camp, because there was still opportunity in that camp. We're going to talk about it in the next section, pages 70 to 93, 71 to 93. There was opportunities in the camp for achievement. There was, and Viktor talks about this right here on page, right within page 66, 67. Your suffering, bearing the suffering was an achievement. If you looked at it like that, most people probably looked at it as, this is punishment for them. God is punishing them. They don't deserve this. And it's not about, I don't think Viktor here talks about whether you deserve this or not. instead of focusing on that, you should be focusing on the end goal in achieving this end goal, right? There still is a purpose in that camp life. There still is a purpose in that camp life, and it's to make your sufferings worthy. And making them worthy in you accept the situation you're in, and you try to see the good of it, and you put the people that you are thinking about in the camp that you want, the first people you want to see when you get out of the camp, you have those people in your mind. That's the goal of all this suffering, to one day see those people. And as Viktor states in these passages, accepting your fate and suffering that ensues is the opportunity to add deeper meaning to your life, because you're obtaining values from that difficult situation, and it's a chance to learn about that situation, but also learn something about yourself too. And it's the people that did not have the mindset of thinking about this as an opportunity or as valuable. These were the people that ended up kind of dying or having a very difficult time of the whole camp life. I think I get into that in this next question. Kind of similar though. Explain the dichotomy between the end of uncertainty and an uncertainty of end. So this is all kind of related as far as, your sufferings and time. Part of the reason you suffered, from how I read it in this book, is that you don't know when prison life will end, if it'll ever end. And actually, still keeping on page 66. Am I on 60? I am on 66. Yep. There's a word that they use. There is a word that they use. And something about a provisional existence. You were given a provisional existence. I think, was that 68? It might have been 68. No. Oh, 69, yep. Provisional. We called it a provisional existence of an unknown limit. Right. I'm sorry. There we go. That would have helped if I was on the right slide, so that I could go right to the page 70. So before camp, think about this before camp. All right, this is how I think about this end of uncertainty and uncertainty of end. Before camp, there were uncertainties. There were uncertainties in the form of your job, school, waking up in the morning, kids doing random stuff, schoolwork, teachers, just in regular life. You go out in the world, you don't know what's going to happen. But you do have a goal in mind, and you do know that you're coming home. You can still go in the same bed, you're going to fall asleep and still wake up, and the same goals and things that you see throughout your life are going to happen day by day. Right. And not that, there's some certainties, but then there's those uncertainties of when I wake up, I don't know exactly what's going to happen today. I know the stuff that I got to do. I still got to go to work, take care of my family. If I'm in school, I got to go to school, all that stuff. But there still lies a little bit of uncertainty. And I think in here, once you got into camp, there was an uncertainty of end in that now things are very certain for you. Unlike in your normal life where in the certainties arise from your freedom in a way. I put this here, in your normal life there were uncertainties because you have the freedoms to make things happen or not. So things change from the choices you make. Right? You decide not to go to work, and then all of a sudden there's some uncertainty. You do something wrong at work. You do a bad job. Well, all of a sudden now there's some uncertainty. Now in camp, there's lots of certainties. You know exactly what you're going to be doing every day. And the guards make sure of that. The officers make sure of that. They are certain that they're going to wake your ass up at whatever, before the sun comes up. You're going to get dressed. You're going to go work in terrible conditions. You know your fate. It's kind of like the myth of Sisyphus, I think, where somebody, I think it was Sisyphus, rolls a boulder up a hill, and he does that for the rest of his life. But on one hand, he's blessed because he knows what he has to do every single day. And in a way, even if you don't have that boulder, even if you're not doing the same thing every day, that can, what am I trying to say here? Like, he's blessed in that he knows what he's doing every single day, whereas me or you, every day is kind of like a new adventure, which is kind of cool, but you also don't, maybe the outcomes of it are good or bad. Whereas Sisyphus knows exactly, hey, this is what I got to do. It's neither good or bad. It's just what I have to do. So the uncertainty of end is that the certainty of daily life in camp now becomes a daily thing to the point where they don't know when that will end for them. You know what you're doing day in and day out, but you don't know for how long. And Viktor talks about how in the camp they had like a morphed time experience where a small time unit a day, for example, filled with hourly tortures and fatigue appeared endless. But a larger time unit, like a week, seemed to pass by very quickly. A day, my comrades agreed when I said that in a camp, a day lasted longer than a week. And this is kind of like a Vladimir Lenin quote where he said, sometimes decades go by and nothing happens. And then sometimes weeks go by in which decades happen. We'll see that come up again in another video. So that's what I think is here. You trade in, when you get into camp, you trade in an end of uncertainty for an uncertainty of end, basically. Let's go on next. What did Viktor mean by time being deformed? Okay, again, this was page 70. Time being deformed. So, this quote right here, a man who could not see the end of his provisional existence was not able to aim at an ultimate goal in life. So now, when this happens, and he talks about how, and there's that Vladimir Lenin quote right there. He talks about the research they did with the unemployed miners, right there on page 70. And they suffer from a peculiar sort of deformed time, which is the result of their unemployed state. So because they don't have any money coming in, presumably, they don't know what they're supposed to do. They're not working. They need to work. They don't know. They need to figure out how to get money. But until that happens, they're kind of stuck in a limbo, right? You're stuck like Neo in the Matrix when he's stuck in that train tunnel between the Matrix and the real world. And you can't get out. There's limbo. I think that's the same thing as in Inception. There's the dream world, and then there's a state of limbo you get caught in. Like I write here, the clock continues to move, but internally your clock is stuck on the fact that your compass is not working. So your compass, your direction in life. So as you see everybody else kind of moving forward and getting ahead, you're stuck behind because it's not that your clock might not be stuck, but it's that your compass is not working. So maybe I could have worded this a little bit differently. Your compass and the movement forward gets time back on track for you. Else it stays deformed until you have that goal. And this can be seen in the prisoners of the camp too. Those that kind of rejected their suffering and kind of mailed it in, well, they didn't stick around much longer. They ended up dying. Right? But if you kept your mind on a goal, and it's hard to do in this camp, I'm sure it is. But as long as you're moving forward, it's something. As long as that compass is on a path that you want to go down, and as long as you move forward to that path, things will work themselves out. You'll get on the right track. I remember reading, there's a book by Stephen Covey called First Things First. And he talks about how it's not about the fact you're in a Ferrari and you got to get somewhere fast, because you could get somewhere fast, but it could be the wrong direction, right? It's better to have the right direction and get there slower, right? You ever heard of that phrase, treadmilling? You're moving your feet, but you're getting nowhere fast. Last question, what do you think the Death of Teheran story means? This was page 56, and this kind of stumped me. I had to look up some ideas on this a little bit. So as you can see, this is the passage here from the book. Essentially, there's a man who encountered death. He begs his master to give him a horse. He flees to Teheran. And then the master sees death, and he says, "Why would you terrify my servant like that?" And he said, "Well, I did not threaten him. I only showed surprise in still finding him here when I plan to meet him tonight in Teheran." Interesting. So the first thing I thought is the guy begs for the horse to only get there faster. So he's going to meet death earlier by getting there faster. So in a way, he's rushing to his death. And I don't know if he knows it. And the thing here is, I don't think when this guy saw death, I don't think he talked to death. I think that he saw death and he ran away right away. It's like if you see a bear, you're not going to stand and just talk to it. You're going to get to safer ground. So he left death dead in its tracks, no pun intended, and death was kind of wondering like, well, he didn't even get a chance to speak. And that's what I asked here is, does he even know he's supposed to be meeting death in Tehran? I don't think so. I don't think he did. I don't think there was a conversation between these two. And this was another thing I wrote, is that he thinks he's escaping, but in reality, he's only delaying the inevitable. And I'm trying to think of the context that, like, Viktor brings this story up after he leaves this camp, and this was when he was picked to go on this transport, and a lot of people thought the transport was going to, like, the gas chambers or somewhere to his death, basically. And people were sad that he was going. He ends up going. And then to come to find out, they did not. They go to the gas chambers. They actually went to a rest camp with some of these other sick people in the transport. In the camp that he left, ended up succumbing to like famine, and people were resorting to cannibalism there. It was very wild. And then he brings up this story. And I wrote this here, responsibility. You know, you are responsible for your life. And, you know, people are going to tell you what to do. People are going to have all kinds of ideas, advice. But ultimately, it's your responsibility to live your life the way you want to and give your life meaning. So I don't think this guy in this story really took responsibility here. He didn't have a conversation. He didn't stop and ask, like, why am I doing this? What am I doing here? You know, why am I fleeing? Can this be settled another way? Because obviously Death didn't, when he met the Master didn't die. Right? It seems like he had a nice conversation with Death. What made this guy think that his encounter with Death was going to be any like thing crazier? Like he was going to die himself? Maybe I'm reading too much into it. But the guy, in the end, here's another thing I wrote. There's a book called Mass Psychology by James Dines. It's actually a finance book about like stock markets, equity markets, money, etc. It talks about this law of countervailing forces, how it deals with the markets, basically how I read this. And it's not just in relation to the markets, though. This is like real life too, where he says the harder you exert effort in one area, the further the outcome you want goes from you. So the harder you try, the further something gets from you. And I feel like this guy trying so hard, I got to get to Tehran. You know what? No, I'm going to get there by horse. You know what? I'm going to fly there. I'm going to get there in 4 times the speed that I can. But in the end, Death will be right there. Death isn't going anywhere. Death is going to meet you there. So you're what did I do? There we go. Kind of like treadmilling. You're getting runs. Your legs are moving, but you're going nowhere. So let me know what you guys think. Maybe I took this story a little more literally, and then sometimes things should be looked at in simple terms, and maybe I dove too deep into it, but thank you guys for listening. We will be back with the review of pages 71 through 93, and that's going to take us through the first chapter. And then the second chapter will start next week, logotherapy in a nutshell. And we'll be done with the first portion, the autobiography. What's it called again? Experiences in a concentration camp. So thank you, everybody, for listening, and I will see you next time. My name is Chris Lazar, and this is Chee-Tash.